מחייכת אני כי האימי הוא אוהב אותי ואני אותו לעולם מחייכת אני כי האימי הוא אוהב אותי ואני אותו לעולם
All right.
Kavoleya hubore haaretz vehashamayim vehayam gam vekol be'olamo Baruch haba Yehovah hu noten lanu chayim Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod bezaman machala hu rofeh bezaman hara'a hu noten bishvil zeh ani noten kavod Kavoleya hubore haaretz vehashamayim vehayam gam vekol be'olamo Baruch haba Yehovah hu noten lanu chayim Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod bezaman machala urofeh bezaman hara'ah hu noten Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod Kavoleya hubore haaretz vehashamayim vehayam gam vekol be'olamo Baruch haba Yehovah hu noten lanu chayim Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod bezaman machala urofeh bezaman hara'ah hu noten Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod bezaman machala urofeh bezaman hara'ah hu noten Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod Kavoleya hubore haaretz vehashamayim vehayam gam vekol be'olamo Baruch haba Yehovah hu noten lanu chayim Bishvil zeh ani noten kavod
Shalom to everyone. I want to welcome you all to another program, P.I.W. IMA, joining together once again, third annual Mind, Body, and Soul Healthful Awareness Week, where we have an opportunity to hear from many speakers, do seminars and workshops for various topics all throughout this week. So we thank you all for joining us this evening, as we have an excellent program for you all that are watching. And of course, you can always go back to the video later on and make sure that you share. So we're going to actually open up this seminar, of course, first with prayer before we continue on with the program, and just let everybody know what's happening throughout this week, and then we'll get started with our program. So once again, we just want to open up our program this evening with prayer so that the Most High can bless this event, bless all of us this entire week as we continue to put forth an effort to join the children of Israel together to the Most High. Hallelujah. We thank you, Jehovah God, for blessing us with life. We thank you for strength. We thank you for good health. We thank you for blessing us with another opportunity to call upon your name and to worship before you even during this time. We thank you for teaching us that you are the creator of the heavens and the earth, that you are our Savior as well as our Redeemer. And we acknowledge you for all that you do for us and all that you provide us with. For you have given us strength, you have given us health, you have given us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. You have given us food, shelter, and clothing. You have given us your commandments, statutes, and your judgments. Everything that we need to survive, we know that we receive it from you. For we know that you are in control of all things. So we do ask that you would forgive us for our iniquities, our transgressions, and our sins as we attempt to move forward in service before you and acknowledging that there is no king besides you. For once again, you are great, you are mighty, and you are holy. For you are one, your name is one. And even on this evening, and even throughout this week, we ask that you would bless the works of our hands, the thoughts of our minds, bless the words and the works of all of those who present, that the information that will go forth will be beneficial for all of us to enlighten our minds as well as our bodies and strengthen ourselves ultimately before you. So we ask once again that you will bless the words of those who present, not just this evening, but all throughout the week, so that this entire event will be successful, and that we pray that your presence will continue to be among us. Blessed be your holy name, Jehovah our God, for we acknowledge once again that you are the King of the universe. Hallelujah. Amen. So once again, we thank you all for joining us this third annual Mind, Body, and Soul Health Awareness Week. As you see on your screen, and then there's going to be the flyer will be coming up on the screen as well, so that we can let you all know what will be taking place throughout this entire week. So once again, we do thank you for joining us this evening. We do request that everyone that is watching shares this video, shares this information, and also beyond that, register for this week's events. And the donation from the registration of this week will be donated to the American Cancer Society. So once again, that information will be presented as we go forth. But once again, we just want to thank you all for joining P.I.W. and IMA. P.I.W. is the Phenomenal Israelite Women. IMA is the Israelite Men's Association. So as you see here, October, amongst many things, is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, as well as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And once again, as we mentioned, when you do register for these seminars this week, the donations will be sent to the American Cancer Society. So we're going to let you all know what is going to be taking place throughout this week. As once again, our information is going on the screen for Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Make sure that you get that information so that those who you know may have some sort of crisis in their life, that you would be able to help them. Also, this month is Mental Illness Awareness Month, amongst many other things. So October is awareness for a lot of things. So that's why this month was selected as the P.I.W. and IMA joined together for the Mind, Body, and Soul Awareness Week. So this evening, we're going to be having Men and Mental Health. This will be presented by Dr. Buna and Lamar, who will be introducing later on. So once again, this evening, we'll be talking about men and mental health. But we're going to let you also know what is also taking place throughout the remainder of this week. So we don't want to just have you focus on this evening's event, but on all of the events that are taking place throughout this week. So we intend to have this program end at 8 p.m. Eastern time this evening. So make sure that you share this video throughout your social media pages, through your text messages, to let everybody know what we are on to do this evening. But as we continue to go forward, we're going to also let you know what is happening throughout the remainder of this week as the PIW and IMA join together. So tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, there'll be an event called Recipe for Hope, Building a Foundation for Elevation. So once again, we continue to repeat it over and over again, and the link will be placed in the chat in the YouTube that you register for this week. But this event, the Recipe for Hope, is where you're going to join the PIW state coordinators and members of the PIW for a conversation to help amplify Hebrew women. And the conversation should be enlightening and thought-provoking. So make sure that tomorrow you grab yourself a glass of wine so you can wind down with your sisters and talk. Then also, we have an event called What's Love Got to Do with It, taking place October 26th, once again from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And it's for amplifying Hebrew love. So you get to join in the group discussion as we dive into what healthy and happy marriages look like. And it'll be hosted by Sar Aharon of IMA and Shanice Evans of PIW. And once again, that'll also be broadcast on the PIW YouTube channel that you are watching right now. Once again, that would be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Then October 26th is also New Moon, Rosh Chodesh. So there'll be services starting 6 a.m. for Rosh Chodesh. So we invite you to join us. It won't be on Zoom, but no, it won't be on YouTube, I should say. You see the Zoom meeting that you'll be able to join us for the Rosh Chodesh New Moon services taking place at 6 a.m. So not 6 p.m. Don't get it confused. It'll be starting at 6 a.m. on October 26th, and it'll be led by Gabbai Tamar Bat-Lewi, as well as Kohen Zadok Benyamin, as well as Mori Yiftach Ben Dan. And once again, you see the Zoom meeting information that you'll be able to utilize. So we invite everybody to join with us as we praise the Most High, because once again, throughout this week, it's mind, body, and soul. So we want to make sure that we edify our soul spiritually with the Most High, being that new moon will be taking place this week. Then we have Erev. Oh, make sure that you join the Cookathon. Now, this is one of the big events for this week. Once again, this is the 3rd annual. So on Thursday, October 27th, there will be 3 battles. There'll be a breakfast battle taking place at 8 a.m. There'll be a lunch battle taking place at noon, of course, 12 p.m. and a dinner battle taking place at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And once again, this is a cookathon or cookie competition between the PIW and the IMA. So it's a competition between the men and the women. And the women are looking for their first win ever. We don't know if they'll actually get that this year, but we, pray for them. But so far, the IMA is 2-0 when it comes to the cookathon, and we want to make sure that, at least for the IMA side, that we continue to do that. And how was the winner selected? So the winner is selected based on your donation. So first, once again, we want to remind everybody to register for the entire week's events. So, but also save some money so that when Thursday comes in, you can donate through PayPal with the email address on the screen, through Zelle with the phone number on the screen, or Cash App with the Cash App handle on the screen. But of course, that would be all posted throughout the day on Thursday. And what you're going to do is when you donate money through PayPal, Zelle, and Cash App, you're going to earmark it either PIW or IMA. Don't put both, put one or the other. And what's going to happen is the organization that raises the most money on Thursday through the cookathon will be declared as the winner of the cookathon. So once again, we're looking forward for another sweep for the IMA. And once again, you see that on the breakfast battle for the PIW, it'd be Kaya Plummer versus Melech Stewart. For lunch, it'll be Geveret Bat Sheba Yehuda versus Akariel. And for dinner, it'll be Hayafa Ruach versus Rabbi Shalomo. So it's going to be a great day, and we're looking for, and it's all going to be broadcast on YouTube, the same YouTube channel for PIW. So make sure that you subscribe to this channel, share this channel, because this is where most of the events, put in 99% of the events will be streamed on this channel throughout this week. But we just wanted to take some time to focus on this big event, the Cookathon. Then we have Erev Shabbat services coming up, and that will be presented by the youth of Yisrael. So the youth of the PIW and the youth of the IMA will be joining together for Erev Shabbat services, which once again, that will be taking place on October 28th, and that will start at 7 p.m. and end at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So we invite you all to join the youth as they present their service before you. And then after the Erev Shabbat service, there'll be discussion for the youth only. They'll have an opportunity to get together. So of course, that won't be on YouTube. They'll have an opportunity to get together and have the topic honoring the dietary law outside of your parents' home. And that will be hosted by Zaria Cooper, and as well as the youth of Yisrael. So once again, this is a collaboration between the PIW and the IMA. Then look forward for the big event taking place on October 30th, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. That will be the 5th annual benefit gala. So we know that this is the 3rd annual virtual Mind, Body, and Soul, the collaboration between PIW and IMA. But PIW started this benefit gala even 2 years before that. So on this Sunday coming up will be the 5th annual benefit gala. And once again, you have to register in order to participate in that. This will not be broadcast on Zoom, on YouTube. It will only be on Zoom. So you make sure that you register. The link is on the screen. We'll post the link in the chat on YouTube, and make sure you share that link through your email, text messages. So you want to make sure you get that, get dressed up, get your table set, because this is a virtual benefit. Once again, hosted by the PIW and the IMA joining together. So registration is $36 for the general public, but for the elders, those that are 70 and up, they will be able to register for $18. So do bear in mind that the registration fees, once again, will be to donate to the American Cancer Society. So make sure that you do register. So we do thank everybody for joining us this evening. We're going to get our program started real soon as we get ready to introduce our speakers for this evening. So we, as you see, once again, the list is on the screen once again, and on the bottom right of your screen, you see it says register now. So you have an opportunity to register for this week's event. So we thank you all for joining us once again for the 3rd annual Mind, Body, and Soul Health Awareness Week. So what we're going to do now is introduce you to the first speaker, because this evening we're talking about men and mental health, which will be presented by the IMA, which is the Israelite Men's Association. And our first speaker for this evening is going to be one of the co-founders of the IMA. He goes by the name of Dr. Earl Bowen Jr., and he's an assistant professor at Cheney University in the Department of Social and Behavioral Science. He also serves as the university counselor. His background in higher education extends over the past 20 years, where he has taught both undergraduate and graduate level courses in Jewish studies, social work, and Africology. Dr. Bowen is ordained as an associate rabbi at Congregation Temple Beit El, which is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He received his master's degree from Temple University in Social Administration and a PhD from Widener University in Human Sciences. His work in both the Jewish community and the African American community has encompassed a broad range of pragmatic activities involving the Philadelphia Urban League, the Jewish National Fund, the African Jewish Committee, and the Black United Fund. He is currently involved in the completion of an oral history project that explores the historic journey of African American Jews in the Philadelphia region. His work on the psychosocial impact of prostate cancer on African American men has been published in both medical and scientific journals. He enjoys teaching, serving in an advisory role to college students, and Judaic studies. So at this time, we introduce to you Dr. Earl Bowen.
Toda, Rabbi Binyamin, appreciate that introduction. I first of all give all praise and all honor to the Great One, the Holy One of Israel. Blessed be his name, blessed be his marvelous majesty forever. May his name be blessed and sanctified, magnified, and extolled among all nations. Hallelujah. I want to thank the organizers of this event, the PIW, those who serve in leadership positions in the PIW, thanking you for once again planning an event that really is outstanding I don't know any other Israelite communities that are embarked in these types of initiatives. And so I want to thank the organizers from PIW. I also want to thank and give my recognition to all of the brothers from the IMA, Sar Aharon, who I've worked with for last, like since 2014. So I guess we're looking at 8 years now. And also all of the members of the IMA, the members of our board, and those who we work tirelessly together in a harmonious way. I want to thank these brothers for their continued dedication to our mission. And it's ironic that when we started in 2014, it actually started in Charlotte, North Carolina as a health initiative for Black men, for Israelite brothers. And so I think it's ironic that we're still talking about health and health initiatives as it impacts. Not primarily, my talk is about the Israelite community, but I really more generally, I think this topic relates to Black men in general who are subjected to institutional racism. I don't know any other way to put it. The bottom line is that when you look at every social indicator, whether it's income disparities, labor market participation, unemployment, incarceration, poverty, all of these things negatively impact Black men. And so invariably we are impacted by this situation. So I'm going to be talking for a few minutes. Hopefully you indulge me. I'm not a long talker. I would much rather have a dialogue with you if we can have time to do that. But I'm going to be, first of all, talking about mental health. That is, what is mental health? Why is it important in terms of our overall health? And what are some of the causes? From that point, I'm going to talk a little bit about my basic premise in looking at mental health as an important issue in our community. And then I'm going to talk more directly about, I think, the impact that racism has in terms of mental health and its impact on Black men in particular, and mainly the institutionalized nature of racism in our society. And then from there, I want to discuss briefly other barriers that impact the overall health of Black men on a broader scale. Then begin to summarize some of the information and some closing comments in this area. So I think the first thing is that we start with the what, and what is mental health. So mental health basically includes three basic things: emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it speaks to the emotional, psychological, and social well-being of people in a general sense, which means mental health affects how we think. That's the emotional aspect of it. It impacts how we feel, which is, how we think is the psychological impact. How we feel is the emotional impact. And then how we in fact relate to others. It relates to our stress level, how we relate to others, how we make healthy choices. And mental health is something that is important in every stage of life, beginning in childhood. So although we're talking mainly about how mental health impacts men, many issues that impact our community, particularly our men, when you really go back and do a clinical analysis, you'll find out that a lot of these things actually stem from childhood experiences and situations that occurred over the course of formative years. So the question is, like, why is mental health? Why is it important? It's important, first of all, if you look at just one of the number one issues that we deal with in mental health is actually depression. And depression itself, although it's mental in nature and emotional, but it also impacts one's physical health. And it has long-lasting effects that could impact things like diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. So although there could be a mental area or emotional area that you're dealing with in terms of your mental health and emotional health, these things also impact physical health. And so there is a direct relationship, which many studies have already indicated that we knew already, but it's important to understand that things like diabetes, things like heart disease and stroke are many times related also to mental health areas as well. Now, what the the Western society has done is compartmentalize these things so that there's mental health, and then there's physical health, and then there are other areas. In our culture, for the most part, prior to the experiences we've had with Europeans for the last 500 years, prior to that, we had a very holistic approach to our health that was not compartmentalized into these various areas. But what we know now from studying is that mental, physical, emotional health are all very, very much interrelated. And something I'll talk about in a few minutes is actually spiritual health, which goes along with that. So the question becomes, of course, what are some of the causes? What are some of the causes of mental health? The reality is that there's not one single cause. There are multiplicity of causes that relates to one's mental health, as well as risk factors. One of the things that relates to mental health has to do with early life experiences. And I alluded to that earlier, that those life experiences that you have as a child growing up can actually overlap into mental health issues that goes into adulthood. And by that, I mean things like trauma, things like abuse. Now I'm talking about child abuse, being abused as a child. Also, sexual assault as a child could be another issue. Another issue that could impact children growing up that can be a carryover into adulthood would be witnessing violence. Whether that witnessing violence is of a direct nature or indirect. But that's just the fact that you've grown up witnessing violence can also be a risk factor for the causes of mental health. There are other things that could be related. In some cases, not very common, but in some cases, that could be biological factors, which is really more of a reflection of a chemical imbalance in the brain, which has been studied thoroughly, really, through neuroscience. So in some cases, that could be a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that could actually be a causative factor that could lead to some mental health issues. Of course, the other ones are more common, particularly when you're talking about the abuse of drugs and alcohol. But one of the major areas that impact the whys of mental health has to do with isolation, social isolation, and not being a part of a community or family, but just feeling that you're all alone. These things are very powerful indicators that could reflect in mental health issue. I'm going to talk more directly about Black men in a few minutes, but I also think it's important that when we talk about a topic like this, we understand that it has broader impacts on all of us, and what affects, in this case, Black men, of course, indirectly relates to how it impacts our families as a whole. So I'm going to now move to what is my basic premise in making this presentation. And the basic premise of my presentation tonight is really trying to better understand and appreciate how psychological health, that is how we think, emotional health is how we feel, and physical health, which is how our bodies function, connects to how we relate to significant others in our lives. That the emotional, the physical, and psychological health relates to how we relate to our wives, our sisters, brothers in the Israelite community, how we relate to our children, our aunts and uncles, how we relate to authority figures, how we relate in general to other people has a lot to do with psychological, physical, and emotional health. But beyond that, physical, psychological, and emotional health is fundamentally connected to our relationship with the Creator. That is, the fundamental area of mental health is related to our spiritual health. And our spiritual health has to do with our relationship to the Most High. And so a lot of what we say, a lot has to do with when we meet each other, we talk about shalom. We talk about peace. And when you think about some of the mental health areas, like, for example, depression is really based on the past experiences that you had that are actually contributing factors to depression. Anxiety has to do with worry about the future. But shalom, which is peace, has to do with being content in the present and being grateful with gratitude for what we have, what the Creator has given to us. And so my basic premise in this talk is that the fundamental element of mental, emotional, and psychological health is directly connected to our relationship to the Most High God, to our God, the God of our ancient forefathers and mothers. Having said that, nevertheless, there are barriers. There are societal value factors that negatively impact psychological, emotional, and our physical health. So a lot of my talk this evening is really meant to focus on external factors that impact our health as Israelite men and barriers to that relationship. Now, later on, in maybe another 30, 40 minutes, Brother Lamar is going to come on, and Brother Lamar is going to focus much more on the micro level implications of these health conditions that we're talking about tonight. But I want to start, as I mentioned before, I talked about the impact of racism in our society. And last year, the CDC made an announcement that may have escaped most of the major news outlets. The CDC said that racism in America is a threat to public health. By making that statement and publicly stating it, it opens the channels to securing possible funding to address racism in America as a public health problem or public health issue. That's important, I believe, in our community because it has direct implications to reparations. And reparations, as we all know, and I'm not going to get on a big kick on that because it's a much broader social issue, but it's a way of repairing the relationship that has been torn apart. Now, we're not unfamiliar with that because we know that our ancestors, when we left Egypt, we did not leave empty. We left based on the reparations that were due to us after those years of oppression. And so for the CDC to admit that racism is a public health issue in America is also an opportunity that we must not take lightly, but we must seize on that opportunity, which means that we must confront those people who control public dollars, which are actually part of our money that go to fund some of these healthcare problems that exist in our community. So what we have always known in our community and others from outside of our community are now beginning to acknowledge that one of the social determinants that has lifelong effects on one's health is the existence of racism. And I'm talking about institutional racism in our society. And these long-term effects have been perpetuated for generations. So we're talking about several generations of the perpetuation of racism in our society that has negatively impacted Black people in general. and Black men in particular. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have to go through the litany of all of the statistics, but as I said before, in every major indicator, Black men are at the very low rim of the socioeconomic ladder. And that is based on something that's been very carefully crafted and designed. So we must begin to understand that this is not just because we have some personal deficit or some lacking in our morality or our ability to survive in a society, but this is contrived. You know, the 83rd division of Psalms says they have taken crafty counsel to cut us off from being a nation. So we first acknowledge that as a reality in our society. The thing about racism and its impact on Black men is, first of all, you know, you don't really need to experience racism firsthand in order to be traumatized about mental health and how it affects you and how you suffer from it. Watching the news of police brutality against Black people in general and Black men in particular, disproportionately Black males are victims of police violence, which you know those names too well, or witnessing prejudice that takes place against your friends, your family, and your neighbors. So that means that even though you may not be or feel that you have been directly impacted by racism, in a way you really are, and we all are, because it does have an indirect impact on how we live our lives and how we perceive ourselves and our own safety in a society. Now, I looked at some research that was done less than 3 years ago, and the research looked at 1-year-old children in the African American community. And what the study indicated that these children at 1 year of age have higher levels of the stress hormone is called cortisol, that Black children have higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol when compared to white infants or white children in the same age. What this research scientifically suggests is that already adverse reactions to discrimination and racial bias have occurred, even as young as a 1-year-old child in our community, because of the nature of race and racism in our society. Now, going a little bit further on that, not only does racism trigger mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and trauma, it also creates barriers to getting help itself. So for many Black men, there's a great disparity in access to mental health resources. I think the lack of access to mental health resources in our community is an opportunity for the Israelite community to begin to set up our own healthcare system. Not that our healthcare system can, in any comprehensive way, supplement the healthcare system in America, but it can be a supplement. It can be the beginning stages of having our own healthcare system where we identify people in our community, whether they're in the medical health field or in the area I'm in, the mental health, Brother Lamar talk later, and others, and begin to have this network in place that we begin to address these issues, because in many instances, Black men do not have direct access to mental health services in the United States as we currently know it. Not only that, but even if they do have access to a doctor or a therapist, they may still encounter discrimination within the healthcare system itself, which is another reason why we need to create our own healthcare system. That is, in many instances, there's a lack of cultural understanding or prejudice on the part of medical professionals that can result in a misdiagnosis or inappropriate treatment, or even discourage Black men from continuing to seek help. So there is this possibility that we know that exists where there's an inappropriate or misdiagnosis or an inappropriate diagnosis, strictly based on cultural barriers. So again, even sometimes seeking access can be problematic in itself. Now, if you compound that, there are other barriers that we have to face and acknowledge. One has to do with the stigma. And, that's probably one of the major ones for Black men, is that there is a stigma that is associated with mental health itself. Many Black men, for example, see mental health problem or a mental health issue as a personal failure, or they might see it as a sign of weakness. And so rather than seeking help, many Black men in particular are more likely to bottle up their suffering and to bottle up their emotions and to try to tough it out alone. What we know from our study of mental health and from the many cases we worked on is that keeping painful feelings to yourself will only amplify and adversely affect both your mental as well as your physical health. So this idea of coping with mental health issues by keeping these things inward and toughing it out will actually do more damage than it will do on the good. And what we know from studies is that in mental health cases, disproportionately, Black men are more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. When schizophrenia might not be the issue at all, but it could be an example of a misdiagnosis. And we do know from research that that is more than likely to happen to Black men. By the way, it's also more likely to happen to our Black boys in public schools who are diagnosed with ADHD and diagnosed with other mental health illness or behavioral illnesses that will stay with them throughout their school years. So we have to be very careful that we keep that in mind. One of the organizations I would recommend that we look at is the Association of Black Psychologists, which has chapters in many major cities throughout the country. But it is a resource that I think we can utilize, and it might, in fact, begin to counteract some of the negative diagnoses that we see happen. Now, this sounds very simple, but for some reason, it doesn't always happen. And that is the simple act of talking with someone, just talking to someone about an issue that you're dealing with psychologically or emotionally. Just the fact that you talk to somebody that you trust and that you can confide in, it makes you feel heard and better understood. But beyond that, it triggers hormones that can cause your nervous system to relieve stress and to ease symptoms of depression and anxiety. That one of the ways of easing depression, anxiety, and stress is to talk to somebody that you trust and that you can confide in. Just talking to them will actually begin to release hormones in the nervous system that will help you to feel better. It doesn't solve the problem initially, but it helps you to deal with that issue that you're confronting so that you can begin to rethink it and maybe reframe it. Talking about your experiences can also make it seem like it's a less intense issue. Acknowledging and expressing feelings of sadness, of anger, or anxiety, for example, can help prevent you, Black men and Israelite brothers, from becoming overwhelmed and better able you to cope with similar emotions in the future. So what are some very basic, concrete things that we can do as Israelite men? Find something positive every day. It could be something very small. It could be the color of the fall leaves, a favorite song that you enjoy listening to on the radio, a message from a friend, an uplifting short story, something you read in the paper. Being grateful, finding the good in even some of your worst days. These things help to boost your level of serotonin. And serotonin is one of those chemicals in the brain. It's one of those quote unquote feel-good chemicals. And it begins to boost your level of serotonin. Just thinking about the goodness of the Most High God, thinking about all of the things that you're grateful for, has a positive impact on your mental health when you think about that. So one of the questions that come up quite often as we talk to different people in different communities is, why is it that Black men don't live as long? Why do we die at younger ages? And one of the things that comes up quite often is that Black men often experience higher levels of stress. And this higher level of stress and anxiety leads to health problems. By these health problems, I'm talking about, first of all, it weakens the immune system. And once the immune system has been weakened, that also affects the digestive system. It increases the risk of heart attack and stroke. And it leads to burnout, which is a state of mental and physical exhaustion. And so when you think about it, the stress that we internalize are contributing factors to the physical ailments that we actually see happening later, that we must learn to deal with. And so, as I said earlier, the major and the most fundamental element in dealing with one's mental health is to develop a greater spiritual connection to the Most High. That is the fundamental element of healthy mental health and healthy emotional health, is to develop greater spiritual connection to the Most High. And that is, as we think about it, looking at psychologically restructuring how we think, something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very simple way of saying that if you can change the way a person thinks, you can change the way they behave. It is, in fact, a theory, but in many cases it works. But in our state, as Israelite men, we have the great one that can help us to restructure. And so we're not just relying on ourselves, thinking about new ways of redirecting pain and embracing new opportunities. The emotional area that we can look at is, how do we strengthen that? There's an emotional intelligence toolkit that I would encourage brothers and sisters to look into. This emotional intelligence toolkit provides many examples of practical things that we can do to improve how we regulate our emotions and being better in touch with those emotions. Physically, we have to look at structured exercising that we're doing on a regular basis, on a routine basis, making sure that you have annual physical exams, knowing your number, as I mentioned earlier, as Rabbi mentioned, I've done a lot of work in prostate cancer in Black men, but knowing what is your number in terms of getting a PSA and beginning to monitor that number year in and year out as you go back for physical. These are important things that we can do physically. But the other part that we do, and I think we do quite well, and that is to embrace our heritage and take pride in our culture and pride in our history as Israelite men. So exercise, just to summarize, very important. What does the exercise do for us? Now we're talking physical exercise. It can ease stress, anxiety, and anger. Exercise has that knack of not only reducing stress and anxiety, but also anger. It gives you a boost to your self-esteem. The other thing would be simple things as relaxation techniques, yoga, deep breathing, meditation, and of course, prayer every day. Can help you to relieve stress. It can calm your anxiety, your mind, and it brings your nervous system back into balance. And then finally, finding a safe place to retreat, a place where you can relax and recharge, let down your guard, a place where you can be with like-minded people. And that is the gift of the Shabbat. This is what the Most High has given to us, that every time the Shabbat rolls around, it's another opportunity to find that safe place that exists, first of all, within us, recognizing that shalom, that peace, that wholeness comes from within. And the Shabbat is, of course, the great gift that Hashem has given to us. And so with that, I hope I've said something that maybe stimulated a little thought, a little discussion, hopefully we could have later. I do want to, again, thank all of you for listening. I think that these areas that deal with mental and emotional health, as I said earlier, are opportunities for the IMA and the P.I.W. to, beyond this meeting, begin to develop the directory that we need to let our people know if there are mental health issues or emotional or physical or whatever those things are, that Israelites in our community know where to go, how to access those services, and how to use them effectively. Because I think these are the times in which we must turn to each other for our source of support, for our physical, emotional, and spiritual healing and wellness. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back over to you, Rabbi Binyamin, and praying that the Almighty will continue to bless the house of Israel. May He make us a blessing. Amen.
We thank you, Dr. Buna, for that excellent presentation. Thanking you for the information that went forth, which is, once again, excellent information in the way that you tied it into the Israelite community as well. Definitely was thought-provoking, and there probably were a lot of questions that people have in regards to that. So for those that are watching on YouTube, you can put any questions that you have within the chat on YouTube. And when we have time towards the end of this session, then the presenters will answer your questions. So, but in the meantime, you can still continue to put, so that way you don't forget your questions. You could put them in the chat. So once again, we do appreciate Dr. Buna for that excellent presentation. So we're going to get into, or speak, or introduce, us to say, our next speaker, who goes by the name of Lamar Walker. He's a licensed professional counselor with over 21 years of experience working with various populations of individuals and helping them improve their mental health. Lamar is the CEO and founder of Mindful Works Counseling, a private mental health practice that helps individuals improve their emotional and behavioral difficulties through the use of storytelling, a therapeutic technique that aids individuals in processing trauma and big emotions. Lamar is passionate about men's mental health, and spreading awareness and education around societal expectations of masculinity and how it impacts the psyche of men. Lamar believes that helping others is his purpose in life. Lamar also spends his time as keynote speaker on mental health and community advocate. Lamar is a servant leader and member of Excel Neo 588 Prince Hall Masonic Lounge, along with Kappa Alpha Sigma chapter of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. In all of the roles he plays, Lamar will tell you his favorite role to play is dad. And you can connect with Lamar Walker by contacting him through email, lamarwalker@mindfulworkscounseling.org. That email address will be placed in the chat as well. So at this time, we introduce to you Lamar Walker.
Shalom, everybody. So when it comes to mental health, there's a lot of pieces and a lot of factors. I've been doing this for about 18, 20 years. But the main things that I look at initially when working with people as it relates to mental health is their symptoms, their triggers, and their coping skills. Luckily, Dr. Bowen has shared with you guys quite a few different coping skills. But let's look a little bit more into the symptoms a little bit. So as men, a lot of times we don't feel like we need help. We don't feel like there is an issue or we need to talk to anybody. So keep in mind that anytime there's a significant change in our life, there's a level of emotions. And throughout these different changes that may occur, whether it's having a child, whether it's moving, whether it's marriage, whether it's any significant losses, and of course we've had a lot of losses and changes within the last couple of years as it relates to COVID. So those things create emotions. Any losses, any changes, there's emotions. And those emotions a lot of times are low emotions, a level of depression. So of course, everybody's thinking, hey, depression, nobody wants to experience depression. Everybody's like, oh, depression is bad, but it's normal to have a level of depression. It's not abnormal to have these lows. The only issue occurs is when we're having these lows for a longer period of time and we're not able to express these emotions and deal with them effectively. And it just keeps on piling up because we're told whenever there's a change, whenever things occur, we just store it in, we hold it in, and we only focus on the happy parts of it, but also there's some losses that we don't really address, and we don't even really address or talk about the emotions that come up with the losses. So we need to have a safe space to communicate. And storing these things over time and having these low emotions over time can exhibit themselves in ways that we're not necessarily aware of. For example, even myself, I'll give you an example. So as an adult male, I would go to work and come home and provide for my family. Go to work and come home, provide for my family. One day I was working at the hospital and I did an assessment on somebody with depression. And I said, oh my gosh, that's me. The way that I recognized that there was a level of depression was because there was a lack of interest. So the things that I used to enjoy doing, I wasn't interested in doing anymore. There was a lack of energy. And of course, I blamed that on the fact that, hey, I was working a lot and taking care of my family. But my energy was not quite there. I wasn't as present as I could be for my family. There was a lack of motivation to do things outside of coming home and going to work. So those things and those symptoms and those changes in behavior were present there. And me being a professional, I was able to recognize it. But a lot of times individuals, don't recognize that, hey, you know what? Maybe I am a little depressed. Maybe there's not a good balance in my life. I'm not doing things outside of just focusing on one area, which is work and home. I guess, trust me, it's definitely easier said than done. So I have clients that I've met with for weeks and months, and trying to create that balance is definitely important. Over time of these stressors, like we talked about, these changes that occur, these things that have to happen in our lives, it creates, yes, a level of stress. So we have the depression piece, which is the lows, because there's been changes, there's been losses that affect us, but also that push, that constant push that we have. Stress, there's two types of stress. So some people say, hey, I want no stress at all. I want a stress-free life. If you had absolutely no stress, you would be bored. Absolutely nothing pushing you. So there's good stressors, which is, hey, yeah, I still got to make money. I still got to make sure that I take care of myself. I still got to make sure I take care of my family or whatever. Those things push us and make us engage and make us do things and make us move forward so that we're not just sitting still. So we want to kind of stay in the middle. But when we have additional stressors or additional changes that occur, it can kind of push us over the edge. And then we find ourselves with anxiety. It's that fight or flight response. That anxiety builds up because there's too much. Like imagine a rubber band that's just pulled just as far as it can go. After a while, it's going to snap. So we need to be aware of some of the stressors, also some planning and create some balance, taking away some of the things that may be too much for us and adding some peace and some calmness and making sure that we're still managing and taking care of things in our everyday life. So again, we have some of the symptoms that you may see. You're on edge, you're nervous, you can't focus, you can't get things done. Those are some of the symptoms you may see as it relates to anxiety. So the lows are lack of emotions, lack of motivation, lack of interest, lack of energy. For the anxiety, there's like a lot of tension, a lack of focus. Another big thing that you see with either anxiety or depression in men is irritability. For us as men, it's easier for us to express anger than it is to express sadness or fear. So anger does two things. It doesn't allow for us to deal with those difficult emotions, and it kind of, for sake of protection, it keeps other people away from us and at arm's length so they don't notice some of these other emotions and we don't feel as vulnerable. However, anger is a surface emotion. In order to be able to deal with our emotions effectively, we need to take some of that down, and express our anger in a way that's more effective. And it's okay to be angry, of course. So we have two major symptoms, or two major symptoms that may occur, like depression or anxiety. Those are the things that I see majority as it relates to the men that I speak with. Some of the other symptoms are rare, and we will get, people watch television and get all kinds of ideas of diagnoses and listing diagnoses. We talked a little bit about the trigger. So triggers for these depression and anxiety, yes, will be stressful situations or too much stress or too much. But it's important to identify what your triggers are. It may not necessarily be change, because some people manage change in different situations more effectively and communicate. Triggers can be conflict situations. Triggers can be, so the definition of triggers are people, places, and situations that create these symptoms for you. Sometimes it is just as simple as our thoughts, like what you think affects your mood, which affects your behavior, which Dr. Bowen mentioned earlier. So once you figure out what your trigger is, then it's up to you to be responsible to figure out a coping skill that can be effective to manage it. Holding into emotions, holding on to things, carrying them around, doesn't allow for you to make a good connection with people around you. I was just talking to a gentleman today, and he was wondering why he couldn't connect with his spouse. After we talked about it, we realized that there was a lot of things not only that happened within his relationship, but things that have occurred in the past that he hadn't really dealt with. He just kind of put it in the refrigerator. And as men, we do that. We put it in the refrigerator and we hold it there. But if you think about it, if you leave things in the refrigerator too long, it spoils. So you got to clean it out. And no one likes cleaning it out. It's messy, it's stinky, whatever. So in the process of working through therapy, we're able to do that. But it's important that you recognize what it is that's triggering you or what is creating these difficult emotions for you. It may be your past situations that you have to deal with. It may be something in the present. It may be someone that reminds you of something that you need to sit down and you need to deal with. You need to talk about. You need to figure it out. So we got symptoms, triggers, coping skills. Okay. So I got a list of coping skills. You may want to kind of jot these down a little bit. The first one that's important as far as creating a balance is participating in hobbies. Find yourself a hobby. Any type of hobby is important. It's important to have something outside of work and home to keep you relieved, to reduce some of your stress. Another thing is identifying boundaries and making sure that you have clear boundaries. Boundaries with yourself, boundaries with other people, boundaries at work, boundaries with your spouse, boundaries with your kids. So letting them know what are some things that may be too much for you. And with the boundaries, having assertive communication. Excuse me. So assertive communication is basically expressing your emotions and identifying what's going on with you and speaking up when you need to. Hold on a second. I have to excuse me. Just got off work. Been talking all day. Assertive communication is expressing your emotions and allowing people know what's going on with you. So you have participating hobbies, boundaries, assertive communication, positive self-talk. Sometimes we have to be our own cheerleader. We have to boost ourselves up. We have to say, hey, you know, you got this. You can do this. Everything is good. You know, just cheering yourself on, being your own cheerleader. Dr. Bowen also mentioned cognitive reframing. So cognition means thoughts. Reframing means to change or challenge your thoughts. So when there's a negative thought, you'll have a negative mood, which leads to negative behavior. So you have to be aware of your negative thoughts and be aware and take the time to challenge them or change them or shift them. The next thing we have is asking for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So when you're feeling low or when you're feeling like you're struggling and there's difficulty, ask for help. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, can someone help me? It's not a sign of weakness. Like a twig is easily broken, but several twigs together is harder to break. Of course, exercise, mentioned gratitude, music, listening to music. Music definitely changes your mood and allows you to feel safe and comfortable. Spirituality, getting into the Torah, reading the Psalms, the book of Psalms on a regular basis. Also journaling. Journaling is actually a good tool. If you have thoughts in your head, your mind works like a computer. So over time, your mind is constantly going. And just like a computer, it'll slow down. So the best way to speed it up again is to download it somewhere. So jot some thoughts and some feelings on a piece of paper. That's you downloading it and cleaning it up. So that way you can free your mind. Volunteering. Take the time to ask for help or give help to someone else that is around you or in the community. You know, there's different pantries and things that you can volunteer at. It's important that we work on our mental health, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else around us, for our loved ones. We definitely need to be at our best so that way we can be there and be more supportive for everyone else around us. There's a saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's definitely important to take care of your mental health so that way you can help and you can be there and live longer and healthier life. As men, we go and we will get a checkup or an annual checkup at the doctor's office, but we definitely need to also check on our mental health, you know, get a mental checkup and make sure that everything's okay. It won't hurt just to sit down with someone that's trained to help you. Just as if you had a broken ankle or a broken leg, you're not going to sit there and try to mend it yourself. You're going to go to a professional so that way they can take care of it. So it's important that you yourself go to a professional and see if they can help you with anything that may be going on with you mentally. So I definitely would advise that you take the time to do so. Any questions so far? What do we have in anything in the comments come up? Rabbi Benjamin? No, I went kind of fast on all of that.
No, nothing in there. Just checking it. Nothing came up yet. No questions yet.
Okay. Rabbi.
Right
Yes.
here, I'm listening to you intently, my brother. Great points. Yes, go ahead.
Rabbi, may I ask some questions?
Yes,
if you don't
sir.
mind.
Let's do that.
It's dialogue.
Let's go
Rabbi,
ahead.
you can come off of mute if you don't mind.
Oh man, am I muted?
Rabbi, are you still there? Rabbi Benjamin?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm still
cool. Let's dialogue for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Rabbi, what's your experience with mental health and people dealing with issues or men dealing with mental health?
Yeah,
So
I tell you, man, a lot of a lot of brothers I think are a little in denial, like not really wanting to acknowledge that there is an issue that they're dealing with. Now you'll find out later as you put it, is like I think what you said about the anger part, sometimes using anger to sort of deflect and keeping people sort of at arm's length is something that a lot of brothers are doing, maybe unconsciously though, but it's a way of keeping them away. It's like we know that anger is a secondary emotion, but there's a primary emotion that's prompted that, but that's when you get to that real kind of touchy feeling where they may not really want to go there in terms of what's really causing the anger, what's the primary emotion, and so there's a lot of deflection, but. And so that's kind of par for the course. But I do think that
Just to speak on what you were just talking about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have the other end of the spectrum, because there's a big thing about now that people talk about as far as toxic masculinity, So when you're a man and you are trying to assert yourself, or if there's something that truly angers you and you're trying to communicate that, sometimes we have to be careful about how we communicate our anger, because then it could be seen as toxic masculinity. So then we tend to hold things in, which creates more anxiety and more depression for us as well. So anger itself, even though it is a surface emotion, anger itself is not bad. It's okay to be angry.
Yes, absolutely.
But the problem is what we do with the anger. And when the anger turns into aggression. And I think that's what people confuse aggressive behavior with so-called toxic masculinity. So just a thought that came to my head.
Oh man, I agree wholeheartedly. It's almost like, and I think sometimes a lot of Black men are constrained because they hold back somewhat because they don't want to be like misunderstood as being, the angry Black man who wants to tear up and destroy and unfortunately, we both know we have this image of, just walking into a store and somewhat people feeling threatened based on how we look or how we're dressed or whatever. And I think that's, it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to spend some time tonight talking about racism. Is because I think that, Paul Laurence Dunbar wrote the song, "We Wear the Mask." And I think in many instances we do. And I think a lot of it is also trying to raise our Black boys to begin to understand what they would be eventually dealing with in this society. That it's about the men, but it's also about that generation, other generations behind us, recognizing that in many instances we pose a threat just because of our physicality can pose a threat.
Yeah, it's traumatic trauma. And then
I wanted to.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Go
No,
ahead,
I just wanted to jump in real quick. 'Cause both of you mentioned music as a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And people in the chat are talking about music as just being a coping mechanism.
Okay.
But let's think about this one. Recently in Jamaica, the Broadcasting Authority has banned content that glorifies illegal activities such as drug use, gun use, and scamming. They do that in an attempt because they say that the lyrics of certain music affects the climate or the culture of the country. So based on your experience or just based on your thoughts, do you feel that music imitates life, or is it life imitating music?
Wow.
That's tricky. Because that goes into two things, okay? So it goes into the so there's two fields of study, two ways that I looked at this. So there is shown different vibrations or different sounds do affect the release of chemicals in your brain. Okay, so the sounds itself can either make you happy or they can make you low. A lot of the rap music that they have if you listen carefully, it's a low key, it's an angry key, and that affects you emotionally as well. As far as the content in it, some content does promote, certain thoughts and certain behaviors. But what we get into also is this, you go into this old battle of nature versus nurture. Okay.
Yeah.
So within our nature, some people feel that that some people have good or bad within them. And some people will say we have both, but it depends on what you feed, So it explains how within our nature, you may have some people in a negative atmosphere or a negative area. They may come from a hood or come from, some dangerous society. They may come from parents that were just completely abusive. However, they've worked out of that and they were good. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're transcending or whatever. And then you have some people that those environments, so nurtured something, and those environments were harsh and were bad, and they became harsh and bad. So as it relates to music, it's kind of tricky. You can't necessarily say that the music creates something, but over time of listening to it over and over again, I'm sure that it does affect your emotions, whether it's, if I'm listening to something that's angry all the time or whatever, then yeah, I have to kind of dig deep to get away from that anger or separate myself from that in order to do better. So I think it's both. The music can have a problem depending on the person or the intensity or frequency, or it couldn't, depending as well. So it can go either way.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's a tough one, Rabbi Binyamin, you bring up. I think a lot of it is the people who are producing the music are reflecting conditions, real social conditions that exist in our society, and they are in writing or singing or playing about that. And that, I guess I see it as the music emanating from the social realities that in our case our people deal with, and it gets reflected in the music because so many of our people, you can see it resonates, quickly. You identify with that. I mean, in my day, Marvin Gaye, what's going on? I mean, that was the thing, that was, yeah, that's right, what's going on. Other people might look at it, Coltrane, of course, would play his stuff and it would be a different take on it. So, but anyway, that's a great question. But my take right now is that the music actually reflects those realistic conditions that our people that we encounter. I mean, you think about the Negro spirituals, our people singing about those conditions that we were under. It was reflective of, that the nature of the plantation and what was going on. And so you look at that and then you look at rap music and you say, well, so a lot of rap reflects some of the realities that a lot of the brothers and sisters experience in the urban setting. But saying all that, I definitely think that music can be used in a positive way as one of the ways of dealing with depression and some of these other areas.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because as I said, both of you mentioned music, and like I said, that was something that came up recently, and that's still an argument. It's been 2 weeks now in Jamaica, and there's been an argument that they're banning certain music because the government is blaming the music for the crime and violence, and people are saying it's the other way around, like you mentioned.
You can't get away from it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was younger, they used to put the explicit lyrics on the cassettes, right?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't sell it to minors. But
right.
Best believe I would find a way to get it,
Oh, yeah.
Somebody had it. Somebody
had
had the Wu-Tang Clan. Somebody had, NWA. Somebody had those explicit lyrics. But we can't, there's nothing new under the sun. Like, these things are real. They're there. They're present.
Yeah.
And okay, and I guess both mentioned, and there is a question in the chat that we'll get to next. But both of you also mentioned activity, exercises, things like that, as another coping mechanism. But from what we see today, at least in American sports, there's a lot of aggression, whether it's boxing, football, even basketball nowadays, if you've seen what took place recently. So is the working out and stuff like that, or is the type of activities that we should get into as men that can sort of quell that aggression? Because once again, you see a lot of athletes and they're very aggressive and they work out a lot more than most of us.
Yeah.
And they're angrier than all of us.
Yeah.
Well, there's some underlying issues with those that are exhibiting anger. I don't think it's in the exercise or in the sports itself. I think there's underlying issues that they're not dealing with that are coming out and we're seeing in these sports and these activities and stuff. The people that are effective in sports or exercising, whatever, aren't angry, that are doing a good job and that are productive. The best boxers don't go into a ring angry. As soon as you walk into the ring and you're angry, you lose. So the exercise increases testosterone levels that are good. Actually, when you're seeing these overly emotional or these outbursts, that may be considered lower levels of testosterone in some of those situations. So, I mean, the sports and activities aren't creating the anger and the aggression. There are other things outside that they're not dealing with when they're going to work, per se, when they're going to these jobs, when they're participating in these sports, and it's coming out during those times. So we need to look at what they're doing on their downtime and make sure that they're balanced.
Yeah, I would just add to that a lot of the exercise, at least for me, that are more personally rewarding, are non-competitive type events where you're really competing with yourself. You're not playing against another person, or you're running or whatever you're doing. The exercise is to increase your own personal endurance, and so it becomes you and that, as opposed to the sort of competing with another person where there's a quote, a winner and a loser. I think sometimes those things can get sort of out of whack because our society is so much based on winners and losers. But I think to me, exercising could be a way of just your own personal development and competing with yourself in terms of what your capabilities are, and not measuring it against an opponent per se. So it could be very constructive. Yeah.
So you're basically saying that competition breeds anger.
In many cases, I mean, it's my own personal view, and I think in many cases it does, because there has to be, I got to win, and that means you have to lose.
So that might be why the P.I.W. is so angry, because they always lose to the IMA every year. But on a different note, there's a question in the chat. Someone asks, what are the do's and don'ts when supporting someone with mental health?
Okay, that's a good point.
Well, listen. First, you need to listen.
Yeah.
Don't try to solve the problem. Depending on the severity of their mental health, then you need to definitely make sure that they get additional help. They may need a professional to help, especially if they're suicidal or they're homicidal. A lot of times people want to try to keep the secret or whatever, and then something happens. Like, you want everyone to know. Like, you need people to be involved. Don't put all of that on yourself. Educate yourself about whatever the mental health issue is, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety. There's classes that you can take. There's training that you can have that's free in the community to learn about how to understand different mental health issues. There's so much that you can do. Take away the label too, because sometimes we want to create a label for this person that they're depressed or they're always depressed or whatever. So just because they have a diagnosis of depression, don't look for it in everything. Recognize that there's more to them than the symptoms. ask them what is it that makes them or helps them to feel better. Encourage them to do more. Encourage them to follow their goals, whatever their goals may be. The tricky part, though, with someone that's definitely dealing with depression is that their lack of motivation and their lack of interest is like kind of really shot, and it's really low. So you do want to push a little bit to get them to be active. You're going to most likely get some resistance. They're not going to want to get out of the bed or whatever. They're not going to want to do things, but that push to get them to get some fresh air, to get outside, to be a little bit more active consistently definitely helps. And also listening to them as they express what they're feeling and their irritation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, to go along with that, what Brother Lamar said is it's important to validate what they're saying. I mean, I think a lot of times, too often, they always see the signs and we say stuff like, you get over it, or, you'll be all right. We give these sort of real quick answers. We don't really validate the pain that they may be expressing or trying to get us to see. We just sort of pass it off. So I think validation is very important, to validate that person as they express what they're going through. I think the other thing is to, sometimes when you tell people that they need to get help, they may want to, but they may not know how. I mean, sometimes you may have to go with them to talk to a counselor or a therapist. Maybe that might be important to do that. Not just tell them, but also to show them. I think there's a saying that when people know better, they do better, but not all the time. Sometimes people can know better and still not do better. And so it's sort of getting them to the point of maybe even taking them to show them how to go about getting help, or as I said, to go with them. But validation is very important. If I tell you, I have a headache, or I haven't been able to get out of bed for the last couple of months, don't just pass that off as being, you're lazy, or you just need to get over this situation, or girl, you better do this, or man, you too. These little short answers can be more damaging than actually be helpful. So validation, and if necessary, taking the person, showing them how to get help, and being with them. That support network, very important.
And
Yeah.
as we were talking about this, for us men, we're a little, we're not so willing to go. So yes, it's definitely important for, generally speaking, most of the men that come in my office, they come with their spouse or their partner, or their partner is like there with them to kind of support them in that. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not making it seem like they're broken, but making it seem that this is, because men want to be helpful, that in doing this, this will help everyone or help the family. So it's definitely important to kind of communicate that hey, help me, help us.
Yeah.
Let's go together and let's do this together.
Yeah.
Also, the validation piece. Sometimes we get caught up in trying to validate, but not understanding that it doesn't have to be valid to you in order for you to validate it.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you may not agree with it. It may not make sense to you, but in validation, you are listening and you are allowing that person to feel heard. So even if you don't agree with it or you don't believe that it's true, that doesn't matter in the part of validating.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I find a lot of times the men that I work with, like, men are generally problem solvers. They want to solve the problem. They want to get down to what's the call. And so helping them to problem solve and coming up with practical solutions that they themselves can work on sometimes could be a very, very good beginning. We were talking about music a minute ago, and I thought about sports, because sometimes you can actually use an analogy of what it takes to to win if they're used to playing, say, basketball or whatever maybe their sport is. I think you got to meet people where they are. So if that's where they are, you might use that as an analogy in terms of what it takes to be successful in this case, let's say playing on a basketball team, but then start to link that to how that can work in a clinical setting in terms of getting help. Some of the same principles could apply, self-help, or, how many assists did you have in the game? Sometimes you need that assist in order to make that basket or score that goal. Where does that come from? And who are the people that's more likely to do that in your life? Helping them to identify sometimes supports that might be already there that they're just not utilizing or they didn't see the link. And so connecting those dots that might already be in their lives, because a lot of times the solutions are there already, but we have to help them to identify how to connect those things together so it can be part of something that they could see as a success on a small scale, but building it.
Yeah.
Before going to, there is another question. I just wanted us to read some of the comments because people just speak about the music. I got one comment that says conscious and enlightened music is different from music glorifying the degradation of Black manhood. And then you have another comment. Even for elders with dementia, there have been cases where they listen to familiar music that brought back memories for them.
Oh, yeah.
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 I mean, I had a friend of mine who has had a brain injury and would have seizures. So certain vibrations or the different sounds he would listen to, and it would, when he felt the seizures coming on, and would calm him down so that he wouldn't go into the seizures. So yeah, music is definitely important, and the different vibrations definitely help. I mean, shoot, the walls of Jericho, they came down. And
Yeah.
so
you have this question here: how can we reduce mental health stigma as it relates to men in our community?
Talk about it.
Yeah.
And if you go to a therapist, don't be afraid to say it. Let's talk about it. Let's have things like this, these panel discussions, these meetings, bring it up, read a book about it. There's tons of books on men's mental health, and there's tons of things that we can just have the conversations and be okay with it. That it's not a weakness. Hey, did you go to the doctor last week? Did you go to the dentist? Yeah. Hey, did you go to your therapist? Yeah, I went to my therapist. Cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's there.
even as a therapist, I go to a therapist, so it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's and think about this. So in Israel itself, we've had therapists. We've gotten away from our culture, really. We are a community, and within the community, we had people that we used to go to and talk to. Even Solomon himself had advisors, and he was the wisest man on earth. So there's a shift from this communicating our feelings and talking about what we think and what we feel, into more of a Western society or more of a European society of individuality, and separating ourselves from our feelings and separating ourselves from each other to be open with our feelings. There's a book, what was it, the twin cradle theory. We come from a warm, nurturing climate, where we would grow things and we would build together and we would express, when there was times of war, of course, as Israel, we were warriors as well. But when we came home, we knew how to farm. We knew how to be present and to allow our emotions to be there. We learned how to listen and to communicate with our women. I mean, there's constant stories in the Torah about communicating with our women. And my grandfather, Alava Shalom, would say, a wise man had one ear to God and the other ear to his wife. So it's just getting past that and understanding that.
Yeah, we have a guy, he plays with the Philadelphia Eagles. He plays offensive line, and I can't remember his name. I was trying to remember his name while you were talking. But he's like really one of the best offensive linemen in the country, in the NFL. but he had a mental health issue. And he has now publicly gone on this sort of speaking engagements when he's not playing football. And his thing is to encourage men. You know, he's like 6'5", about 280 pounds. But he talked about depression and anxiety and stress and all of these things. So I think to get also to that question about how do you encourage other men is that you actually start to point out real life situations where men are in fact seeking help. And that in itself encourages other men to come out to do the same thing. And I think the more we have these open discussions among our community, I think the more we will begin to normalize mental health as something that's just, as Brother Lamar said, just like physical health, getting, from a broken leg, but dealing with the whole mental illness area. That's a stigma we have to continue to break through.
And then going back to the chat, just wanted to, so there's a comment, it's not just men who have mental health, women do too. At the beginning of the program, Dr. Boone, I did mention mental health in terms of both genders. The only reason, I shouldn't say the only reason, one of the reasons why this seminar is focusing on men and mental health is because men tend not to deal with it. Men tend not to go get diagnosed. And as Dr. Boone mentioned, young men, young boys that do get diagnosed often get misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of complications that comes with men and mental health, which is why specifically we're talking about men and mental health. But of course, yes, both genders deal with mental health. And so the question here is, are all men's mental health the same? Well, if I mean, are all men's mental health issues the same?
No. I mean, I think I've pinpointed like at least two, depression and anxiety. But I mean, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's ADHD, there's bipolar, there's all kinds of different mental health issues that occur. And it's not just anger, it's so many different things. Like there's a whole book like this thick on different types of symptoms or diagnoses as it relates to mental health. And it's not gender specific. So yeah, whatever mental health issues that a man can have, a woman can have the same mental health issues. They may exhibit themselves slightly differently, but yeah, it's not just one thing. There's so many things there. And just as we said, when you go to the doctor or whatever, and there's something wrong with your leg, every time it doesn't mean that it's broken. It may be fractured. You may have a sprain. You may have torn something or whatever. So every mental health issue isn't the same, but it's really important to find someone to talk to figure out what exactly is it, where does it come from, and what can we do to work on it and to get past it.
Yeah. Yep. Ditto. It could vary, as brother said. It could be a lot of different things. I think a lot of it is also helping the man or the individual to begin to understand where some of this might be coming from, which means some maybe examination of things that's happened in the past that could be, as Brother Lamar said, triggering those events. But that's really a process of opening up and getting men to openly engage and to talk about things that maybe they really never really open up to anybody else about. But so this really kind of relates back to the man having some comfort level and feeling safe in an environment where he can express himself openly without fear of being judged. And that really has to do with relationship building. And I think the more we come together, in this case, as men, and now just a quick plug for the IMA, is that one of the purposes of the IMA is to get men to begin to relate to each other and as other men as individuals and to build relationships. Because as you build relationships, you also build trust and greater levels of understanding. And that opens up communication channels and allows us to engage with each other, and that it becomes part of a self-help approach to our development as a people. But we have to have more of these type of forums where where brothers in this case can really talk to each other about what's going on in our lives, and keeping in mind that these things have greater implications for those generations, our children that are coming up later, particularly our male children and female children. I mean, it's hard to separate these two, because what impacts Black men invariably will impact our women, the children, and the family at large, and vice versa. But I think this PIW IMA week is to me, I'm so encouraged by what's going on, because this needs to happen in our community more and more. This is how we build Israel, from the inside out, build it from the ground level.
And keep in mind too, one thought that I had was, just because there are certain symptoms or certain things going on doesn't mean that it is a mental health issue. Just because someone is depressed doesn't mean that they have a mental health issue. Just because, or a clinical issue. We are human and we do have emotions. Some things, so it only becomes an issue when it affects your everyday functioning. If you're not functioning 100% on a daily basis, like if you're not able to enjoy life, if you're not able to, interact and engage with people effectively, if you're not able to, just feel good about yourself and just life in general over time, that's when it becomes an issue. There are people that you can kind of slap on all kinds of diagnoses on them if you were to look closely. Just because someone enjoys cleaning doesn't mean that they have OCD. OCD is a little bit more extreme. Like, they can't leave their house until everything's clean, and they wash their hands like 5 or 6 times in one sitting. Just because someone is depressed doesn't mean that they have major depression and that they need to be on medication. Like, going through those lows because there's a death or a loss or you're grieving or whatever is normal. Just because you're anxious about a test doesn't mean that you have anxiety disorder and you need to be on medication or you need to see someone. This is important to you, so you're going to be a little bit nervous, or a little nervous in an interview. However, if you can't leave the house in order to get to the interview, or if you can't even speak or words can't come out of your mouth, then you're not able to function effectively. Then there's a big issue. And so just because we have these emotions and we may have certain symptoms doesn't always make it a mental health issue. But if you're uncertain, go find out. Talk to someone that knows or has training to find out or help you find out.
Yeah, that sort of leads to this question that's also in the chat. What do you say about grieving mental health?
Grief, everyone does it differently. Everybody does it differently. It lasts different. I mean, different stages to grief that I go through with my clients when we talk about the different stages of grief. It's necessary. We don't always grieve when we need to grieve, and we don't know what to grieve about. But yeah.
So basically, so mental health issues could be a result of grieving, but as you said earlier, grieving is not necessarily a symptom of a mental health issue, so to speak.
It's okay. You can grieve.
Right.
There's a loss, there's a change. Grief is good. It becomes complicated grief when it's over a long period of time and you're no longer functioning. Like, you are hyper focused on whatever the loss and change is, and that consumes your dreams, your mind, and everything. Or you're not even accepting or getting to the point of understanding that whatever it is that's gone is actually gone. You're looking for it still.
Yeah, And I think the other thing about grief is, like, I know automatically we kind of think of death as important, but you could grieve the loss of a relationship. Could be could be, well, not just as, but it could be very devastating. That could be a whole nother area of grief, but it's really a normal process, and I think it varies based on individual circumstances, culture, those things. I know in the past there were people have written about stages of grief, but I think that it's not really something that has a sequential order. That individuals can grieve at different stages, and it doesn't mean that this stage leads to that, and then there's some quote unquote resolution and your acceptance. I think it really depends a lot on the individual and their own and the relationship that existed with what was lost, whether that was an individual or relationship or some other area. But it's in no way, I don't think, an indication of a mental health disorder, quote unquote. It's just a process that we go through when there's a significant loss that occurs in our lives. And we accept it as being a normal process, not putting a time frame on it. But
Be okay with not being okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay with not being okay.
Yeah.
We'll be ending this session of the virtual couch soon. But as put in another plug, as Dr. Buna mentioned, for the IMA, we'll be returning to an in-person retreat next year, May 4th to May 7th. It'll be taking place at Camp Louise in Maryland. We can get full details by going to www.israelitemensassociation.org. So we'll be coming together in person to be discussing topics such as this. Of course, we'll have, Shabbat day service, which helps, as Dr. Buna mentioned earlier. So once again, we will be returning in person. And also the P.I.W. will be returning in person for their retreat. We'll speak about that in a few minutes as well. So just wanted to mention those separate events from the P.I.W. and the IMA. But just bear in mind that this week, both organizations came together to put together a series of seminars, workshops, not just dealing with mental health, physical health, financial wealth / health as well. So those are the things that we'll be talking about this week. And we encourage everybody to register for the entire weeks of events. So that way you can also be abreast of everything that P.I.W. and IMA is doing. So as we continue to wrap things up this evening, I don't know if okay, well, there's a question about race, which Dr. Buna did mention at the beginning of the presentation, and that may have been missed. In regards to mental health being race specific, I don't know if Dr. Buna just want to spend a few seconds and rehashing what you mentioned about what the CDC said about racism and how it affects Black people.
Yeah, I would just mention that the CDC has acknowledged publicly that racism is a public health issue in this country. And the significance, I think, for that is that my personal view is that I really I'm a strong advocate for reparations. I think there's a debt that we are owed. Now, how that reparations would take place, that's debatable and not apropos for this discussion tonight. But I think that's just one avenue in which public officials have acknowledged that this is an issue in this country that we need to address, and it's not going to go away. But there are other factors, I think. Trying to remember the book that's been written that deals with post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name, but anyway, you would know, many of you heard about that. But there are many instances now that actually show, we're not just talking about our ancestors who were enslaved. I mean, we're talking about them as well, but how this is a continuation of systematic oppression against Black people that actually plays itself out in terms of our own mental health and how we relate to others and ourselves and that whole avenue. I mean, there's a lot of research out now that's coming out much more. I think we need to pay attention to that, because I think that, this is an issue that we need to remember, that race is a real issue in our country. And, critical race theory and some of those things are things that we want to maybe keep those things in mind and hold elected officials accountable to some extent. That's the other point I was trying to make.
Yeah, the book is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy.
Yeah. Thank
So,
you. Thank you. That was the book I was trying to remember. I couldn't recollect the name, but I think it's worthwhile reading for us. And there's more recent work that she's done now. If you Google that information, it will come up, and we need to be on top of that stuff. As Israelites, I think we have to understand what's happening to our people on a broader scale.
And then there's secondary trauma too.
Yeah.
So even if we're not experiencing it firsthand, we're seeing it on the news, we're hearing about it, which as a result, now when we go outside, we're extra leery, we're a little nervous, we're a little anxious. When we walk past a police officer, or when we see lights, we're a little anxious, we're a little on edge. So yeah, it's that secondary trauma. Just hearing the stories, just watching the stories is traumatic, and it affects us also. Yeah, just hearing the stories of racial experiences that we've had or other people have had over and over again, and not having that white privilege, to get past situations, and constantly running into these barriers and these walls that are hard to knock down because of our color.
Absolutely.
And then it's twofold, being African American and having, being an Israelite or being Jewish, so now, we get that not just from Caucasians, but then we get a level of racism from our own people.
That's
You know,
right.
oh, you're not Christian, you don't believe in this and that. And so
Mm.
then now you start to doubt yourself, and you start to feel uncomfortable with being able to have conversations or even be in certain realms. Yeah,
Mm.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we thank you both for the excellent presentations this evening. And, you can leave some contact information so people could contact you. And I know one of the main issues with men getting therapy and or counseling is privacy. So just want to let everybody know that if you do contact either or both presenters, that any such as you have would be private. So I don't know who to go first, and just leave a word in closing and contact information for those that want to reach out to you for more information, for more dialogue, I should say.
You can go ahead, Lamar. It's going to
Yeah, it's Lamar Walker, licensed professional counselor. The best way to reach me is my website, which is mindful, MINDFUL, works, WORKS, counseling.org, and just select request a call. And then, I'll get with you, because I get a lot of calls coming in. So that at least that put you on a schedule, so that way I can get to you right away. Or you can email me directly, which is my name, Lamar Walker, at mindfulworkscounseling.org. So either way, it is definitely confidential. I do a men's group on Sundays virtually, where I meet with men that are 40 and up, married men, and we talk about women and the issues that they have or struggle with within their relationship. So every Sunday at 12 p.m. I do that. Also have in Atlanta, Georgia, I have a men's workshop on relationships that I'll be hosting December 11th. So yeah, and you can follow me on social media. Yeah, not hard to find.
Yeah, I'll just say that there are two ways you can contact me. One is just Earl Bowen Jr. at AOL. That's my private email, which is always open. But I do a show every Monday called Mental Health Mondays. It's actually run out of Morris Brown College there in Atlanta. But it's all over, and it runs from 9 to 9:30 every Monday morning, where we talk about a variety of mental health issues on a broader scale. So that's actually another way to tune into my weekly sessions about mental health. Well, as I said, you could actually just email me either way at my personal email address, and happy to talk to you on a confidential line that we use that is HIPAA compliant and all of those things. So we're happy to talk to you whenever the need might arise. So thanks.
So once again, we thank both of you, Dr. Bowen, Lamar Walker, for presenting this night. And, we got into a variety of topics or subtopics dealing with mental health. And, of course, this conversation will be ongoing. There will be things that IMA will continue to do. And just once again, just log on to IsraelMen'sAssociation.org. You'll get information on things that are coming up, and also follow the PIW as well. Also subscribe to the channel that you're watching on YouTube. So you can get this great content and more content, especially for this week. We're gonna see the slideshow presentation of the events that will be taking place this week as well. But once again, just want to thank you both for joining us this evening, and just reiterating it, for the person, there was a question in regards to, you don't have to answer that. I just want to make sure that it was acknowledged. How do you help a brother who doesn't feel that therapy can help their depression? And they did answer that earlier. They said that you have to do what you can to take them there, like showing them as opposed to telling them. So on the screen, you see that the Phenomenal Israelite Women, they'll be having their 18th annual conference entitled Have Courage in Serving Hashem. It's going to take place Thursday, March 2nd to Sunday, March 5th. And this is one of the only ways that the PIW has a stronger hand than the IMA, because they're going to Jamaica. We're just going to Maryland. But that's the only time that PIW has something greater than the IMA. But you definitely see the information there. Register for the conference. It's an in-person conference. They're getting back to an in-person conference in March in Jamaica, all inclusive. For those that know the Rio, all inclusive. So that's going to take place March 2nd to March 5th. And once again, the IMA retreat is going to take place in May. See, we chose a month that is actually a little bit warmer. So from May 4th to May 7th will be the IMA's men's retreat, and taking place once again in Maryland. And you can go to the website for more details. But in terms of this week, we invite you all to register for this week's events, especially for the gala taking place this Sunday. It's a virtual gala, but you want to make sure that you register in order to participate in that. Subscribe to this channel for PIW. So tomorrow, the events that will be taking place 6 p.m. And then also remember that Rosh Kodesh service on Wednesday, 6 a.m. And then more content to take place throughout the rest of the week. Look out for the youth doing their Erev Shabbat service this week. And once again, mentioning that this week, the Mind, Body, and Soul Health Awareness Week from PIW and IMA will close with the gala on Sunday. And I'm going to ask if he's available. I see his name out there. Maury Amram to close us out in prayer. But if he's able to, and he's getting himself ready, I see Rabbi Deborah Bowen out there in the chat. Shout out to you. And she's exhibiting some trauma as well, because she's waiting for the PIW to win in the cookathon for the first time. So do remember that this Thursday will be the cookathon, PIW versus IMA, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 7 a.m., 12 noon, and 7 p.m. So there'll be male cooks versus female cooks. And so far, it's 2-0 this year, 2-0 up until this year for the IMA, and PIW is looking for their first win, but hopefully that won't happen. So once again, we thank you all for joining us this evening. And once again, if Maury Amram is available, I see him out there, he can say a prayer to close out this session.
Okay, shalom, shalom. I would be honored. Let us humble our spirits before the creator of heaven and earth. Ya sipatai tifta kufi yagid tehela teika. Open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise. O King of the universe, creator of heaven and earth, we give thanks and praises unto you for all things and everything, for life, health, and strength, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, food, clothing, and shelter. We thank you for our lives, the lives of our families and friends, the lives of the families of the whole house of Yisrael. Oh, Yah, and the lives of even all those that are seeking truth upon the face of this earth to come and serve you with all their heart, soul, and might. We thank you for this forum, Yah, for you have brought us a very long way. We thank you for this forum. We thank you for this discussion. We ask, being that you are the ruler of the spirits of all flesh, to make this an ongoing discussion, Yah, to even cause the brothers and sisters to come out of their shells and open up so that we can communicate and dialogue with one another into building this great nation of yours. We ask that you bless the works of our hands. Accept the works of our hands, Almighty Yah. Forgive us for all the iniquities that we have committed, and forgive us for the sins, and forgive our forefathers for the sins that they committed in their day and time. We have learned because you left the history and the word on record for us to know and understand that we have to get it right this time around. Oh, Yah, quicken our spirits and our souls so that we may do what is right and pleasing in your sight, so that you will favor us, oh Yah. We ask that you will bless all the participants, bless all the presentators, those that presented this presentation. Guide, shield, and protect them, and continue them in their great work, this work that is needed in our nation, Yah. We ask your blessings in your most high, your most holy name. We ask you to bless us and keep us. We ask you to cause your face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. We ask you to lift up your countenance upon us and grant us peace. Hallelujah. Amen. Wasila. Chalawa Barakai.